Hello.
Uh, Nathan, what was that?
I don't know what you're talking about. Everything is perfectly normal.
Um, okay, I just felt like I heard a weird. What is going on?
Listen, listen, this is perfectly normal. This is how a podcast, this is how a TV show normally operates. Welcome to Ignore the Bell.
What? Why are there just random sound effects? I don't
Stranger
understand.
Things 2 edition.
Oh my goodness, this feels very over the top. I don't know why we're doing this. This is
Because we have the same editor as the sound editor for Stranger Things 2, in case you did not catch on.
Oh.
Hello, I'm Nathan.
Okay, and I'm Tyler. I'm gonna try not to create any more of those sound effects.
Everything will trigger a sound effect or some ridiculous song. Every single thing. If we have a new person who comes onto this podcast, you know they're going to have a theme song very, very quickly because this is the Stranger Things 2 edition. In case you can't tell, we have got some serious issues with the sound editing when it comes to Stranger Things 2. If you have not rewatched Stranger Things 2, go and rewatch it and just like have your mind like just get tied up into a horrible pretzel with like how frustrating it is to watch because of the sound editing.
Yeah, you literally only need to watch like 5, 10 minutes and you'll
Yeah,
already understand exactly what we're talking about.
yeah.
Once you're paying attention to the sound editing, like you realize just how awful it is.
That's right. And it continues throughout the entire season.
Mhm.
So we're going to get into this. So we do have a sponsor for today's episode. So our sponsor for today is the character of Poochie the dog, the rockin' Rasta dog from The Simpsons. So if your TV show, podcast, life in general is desperately out of date and looking for some kind of relevance, just introduce a new character in this desperate ploy to boost your ratings and seem more relevant. And with it, Poochie the dog. Go get it today. Because that's exactly what Stranger Things 2 is. Like I said this before we started recording, but in part, I feel like this podcast is going to be a little redundant. If you really want good criticism of Stranger Things 2, just go and watch the Simpsons episode with Poochie the dog, because that does everything for you. You know, worst episode ever. This is worst season ever. Like it's so oh
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, maybe a more relevant comparison that I'm just thinking of now would be New Coke.
yes, exactly. Because there was nothing
Stranger
wrong
Things
with the
5.
old one, but let's just all of a sudden introduce this new thing that no one likes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there was nothing wrong with the original.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
was wrong with Stranger Things the first season? Nothing. It was great. Yeah,
yeah,
we had a couple little things. We nitpicked a little bit,
yeah.
but
But yeah, we're gonna get into the sound editing, the new characters, all kinds of other things that we have issues with. Episode
we'll,
7.
uh-huh. We'll try to find some good, I guess. Oh man.
Yeah.
That's gonna be tough. It was tough to find some bad in Stranger Things the first season, and I think it's gonna be just as tough to find good in Stranger Things 2.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah. And sorry, I should very briefly introduce this. So this is we've already done a Stranger Things podcast. We're doing Stranger Things 2, and then what we're going to do, and this is the first on Ignore the Bell, is that we are going to do an episode by episode review reaction to Stranger Things 3. So
Mhm.
we'll be doing that as of July 4th. Then we're gonna release one video a day for each episode in the season, and we're gonna try very hard to do that, to actually stick to that, where we don't move on to the next episode until we actually record a podcast.
Yeah, and I promise those fireworks sound effects that you just heard, those will be the last random sound effect in this episode.
Right. All right, folks. I hope you enjoy. All right, so we're talking Stranger Things 2 on this episode, and I know that we're going to get into the sound editing almost right away. But so I just want to mention this at the very beginning. We talked about this before. We talked about it like just after Stranger Things 2 came out. I don't know when that was, like a full year and a half ago or something like that. Then you and I we talked about it, and I said that it is so significant that they don't call it Stranger Things and then it's season 2. It is titled separately. It is titled, there's Stranger Things and then Stranger Things 2. And I think that Stranger Things, the first season, or just Stranger Things proper, is very much like a long extended film. It doesn't really feel like a TV series, even a serial TV series. It doesn't feel that way. It's meant to be binge watched.
Yeah.
Because you don't get this repetition of characters and all of that. It's like they expect you to watch this very, very quickly, like a very long film. Well,
Yeah.
Stranger Things 2 is everything that a bad, unnecessary sequel has. Like, it has all of those elements of a bad, horrible, unnecessary sequel. You've got, just new characters that you don't like. You've got more villains than you've seen before. Like, the first one, there was one. Now there's dozens of these things, potentially hundreds. Who even knows? You get ridiculous little repetitions from the original, where it's like, hey, remember how you loved that element? We'll redo it, except much worse. And you're going to be like, wait, you've done that before. Why are you doing this again? A la Joyce's house going crazy with all the stuff that she's putting up everywhere. She's a crazy woman. Oh, that's even better the second time. Not.
Yeah, I mean, I want to talk about that. It makes absolutely no sense that, my goodness, I was like just so upset when she's like, these fit together. I'm like, what do you mean they fit together? You can put literally any two sheets of these random scribblings
They
together.
totally don't fit together. That was so stupid. Everything about that was so stupid. The fact that they used fast motion on Will's hand when he's doing this, like, and it's so obvious that it's fast motion on his hand. We're like, oh no, he's going crazy. And it's like, oh no, you guys are just using fast motion. Like, this is so
Yeah, it's oh my goodness. And then the fact that like that Bob takes, like 3 minutes and then it's like, oh, it's a map. I'm like, what?
Yeah, the bodies of water gave it away. Come on, guys. And like, how long have we known that Bob is really into puzzles? Well, about like, I don't know, 45 seconds before he walks into the house. Oh, when I was sick as a child, I loved puzzles. Here are all my puzzles. Therefore, I'm great at solving puzzles. That's what this entire season is. They have no patience to establish characters, so they just run roughshod over character development, character revelation. It's just a boom, there it is. They vomit it out onto the screen. They use the laziest possible devices to establish who these characters are, and then they expect us to just accept it, and we're just like, oh, okay, that was great.
Yeah, I mean, Bob, on the very first episode, like, oh, how do we show that they're in a relationship now? Oh, let's just have them make out in the back closet. Like, what? Why?
With ridiculous music playing, right?
Of
course, there has to be ridiculous music playing. Now, okay, we really will. We'll get into the sound editing. The thing is, though, when we were talking about, because when we did our Stranger Things podcast for the first season of it, then I had not rewatched Stranger Things 2 when we recorded that. So, but I kept making references saying that Stranger Things 2 is clearly for a much younger audience, that they are pandering to preteens and early teens. But I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was exactly that was doing it. I mean, like, definitely you get a little bit more with the romantic aspect of it and this love triangle that you have, and getting Mad Max introduced, and then you've got like Eleven who shows up because Will just desperate, like, you know what I mean? You get a little bit more of the romance there, but really what it is it's like a really bad, well, maybe not really bad, it's like any TV show from the Disney Channel.
Yeah.
Like I can't even watch those shows. I don't have much. Like honestly, I'm in completely uncharted territory for myself because I can't watch those shows. But it's like everything where it is just so on the surface of over the top characters. They're all caricatures. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like, and this season is just clearly the only thing that I think it's missing is a laugh track.
Yeah, no, I think you hit it dead on right there. And it's frustrating, especially because it's not just the new characters that they did this with. It's they retroactively
Yep.
removed some of that depth for some of the other characters.
Yep.
Like Eleven becomes just the jealous girlfriend, like for a
Uh-huh.
bit. And I'm just like, wait, what? Why is she like she saw Mike smile once when when he was around a girl, automatically she's in a jealous rage.
Which is,
Like,
yeah, enough to power her to move an entire train car. Right? Like, why
yes.
didn't Yoda ever tell that to Luke when he was training him? Not just like, there is no try, but it's think about that time you liked a girl, but she likes someone else. Then you can move the ship. Maybe that's what would have like, that's the most powerful, option in the Force.
Yeah, honestly. Oh man. Yeah, I hate, talking about how bad things are, but
Me too.
it's
Me too.
it's frustrating. It's very
Yes.
frustrating how bad this season is. I
Yeah.
still don't really know what to call it.
Me neither. This sequel.
Yeah.
I, I hear you because I also and that's the thing is a lot of people will say, well, why don't you like review this on the podcast? Why don't you review that? And I say because there's too much good content that I don't want to waste my time talking about bad content. And a lot of people do like they think that like criticism means that you are being critical of something that you're always like or that you're like criticizing all the time, that you're
Right.
constantly pointing out the bad. And that's not what being a critic is, or critical theory or critical studies. That's really not it. It's taking a very close examination of a particular object and then really examining it, a particular text. And then you get into what is it doing? Why is it doing it? What is the effect, good or bad? And I want to spend my time primarily talking about good and when something is
Yes.
being done to good effect, because why would I waste my time with bad stuff? Like people who kind of hate watch things or watch things because like, oh, it's so bad it's good, like that's just really not my thing. I don't like, if people want to do that, that's perfectly fine. It's just
Mhm.
for me personally, I don't enjoy that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So talking about some good is easier when we are doing comparisons to Stranger Things 1
uh,
because we can talk about the good in Stranger Things 1.
mhm.
Um, for example, the introduction of basically any character in Stranger Things 2 is it's very heavy-handed. It's okay, this is everything that you need to know about the character right away.
Hmm.
If you look back at, Stranger Things 1, let's look at 11. What do we know about her when she
Yes.
first appears? Absolutely nothing.
Right.
We don't know that she has powers. We don't know that, like, that she actually came, like, from the Department of Energy
Right.
or facility. We don't know that she's the one who opened the gate that
Right.
let in the Demigorgon. All that stuff is revealed, like, in its due time. It's all
Yes.
withheld from us at first. Meanwhile, in Stranger Things 2, then it's just time after time, it is this is what you need to know about this character. This is what you need to know about that character. And that's what makes them feel like caricatures. Because you're telling
Correct.
me that this is the only thing I need to know about this character.
Well, and you're telling me exactly what to think about these characters, and you're telling me by in the laziest way possible. I genuinely think that this is the laziest way possible, which is to give them a stupid theme song because that's what they're doing. And
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. Like you nailed it, which is, and I was thinking about that before we started, that if you compare the way 11 gets slowly revealed to the audience in Stranger Things, so the first season, compared to all of these new characters that we get, then there was the expectation in season 1 that the audience will be patient with the filmmakers. There
Yeah.
is no expectation that the audience will be patient in season 2 or in the sequel. That's where I'm saying that it's like they're marketing this, or they're not marketing, but they're gearing this towards a younger, more juvenile audience, because there's this expectation that, oh, they're not going to be patient, they're not going to catch subtlety, so we have to hit them over the head with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer, like being hit over the head by a sledgehammer. You know what I mean? Because there's no
Yeah.
subtlety. It is just so ridiculous. And I don't think that that's actually how you make a good show for preteens or early teens. Like, I want to make that very clear. But
Mhm.
that's how a lot of Hollywood executives and Hollywood writers think you make a good show for preteens and early teens. They think, make it as obvious as possible. The only way that I think this works is if you are making a comedy. If you're making a comedy, I think that this strategy works. But Stranger
Yeah.
Things 2 so often seems like it is diverging. It is now becoming a comedy. And then it kind of jumps back to being a mystery, like a supernatural mystery horror, to some degree a procedural, with like Hopper slowly like working his way through things. Like that, it kind of comes back to that, to a drama, to a coming of age drama, to in some cases, like a period story. You've got action elements, but then it goes right back to being a comedy. And I don't get it. You have all of these characters and sound editing emphasizing this, where it all becomes comic relief, but
Mhm.
there's way too much relief that you end up taking entirely away from any real tension. And it feels like the Scary Movie franchise. Like, it feels like a parody of what Stranger Things is. If somebody were to do a
Yeah.
parody of Stranger Things, it's like it would be this.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's with regards to even like the relationships between characters, not just individual characters, but the
Yeah.
relationships between characters. In Stranger Things, the original, then Mike and Eleven, then they, you might be able to tell that they have some kind of chemistry or whatever, but it's really, really subtle
It's
for the
subtle.
longest time.
Yes.
And then, and it slowly develops. And it's not even,
Correct.
like you don't get these longing glances or big eyes or anything where they're like, oh,
No, because
like
they're both
whatever.
embarrassed because they're
Yeah.
young. And anybody who's ever gone through this, like, nobody has, let's say, before you have ever, if you're, like, so before you ever kiss a girl, you don't you don't immediately start by going, wow, and you just stare at her in class with everybody else and you're like, she's amazing, wow. You don't do that. You're like, oh, okay. And then you get embarrassed, right? Because you're
Yeah.
like, oh man, like, I don't even know what to do with these feelings that I'm having, because this is new and it's therefore uncomfortable because I'm not used to feeling this way. And is it super obvious? Am I blushing? Are my ears red? Like, so you're constantly like lowering your head or averting eye contact. But this Mad Max shows up, and all three of them, like, or four of them, like, with the music playing, are just whoosh, and they just stare
Yeah.
at her.
Yeah, it may as well be, a slow motion head swing, like
Right.
they're
That's what
swinging
I'm saying. In a
coming out of the
comedy,
ocean shot. Like,
you're exactly right. Because in a comedy, that's what you would do. If it was a teen comedy, then it would just be that. And it's like, okay, we get it. Because there's no subtlety. It's just like, well, we need
right.
to clearly establish this. But they have just dispensed with subtlety altogether, because you're exactly right. If you look at the way Mike and Eleven, the way they start developing that, uh, the romance between them, and that it is subtle, but it's very, very clear, right? Like, it's not like over the top. It's not like, what I mean by subtle, but it's clear, is that you can tell that Mike has got feelings for Eleven, that he thinks that she's pretty and that she likes him back. But it's not like, wow, she's so pretty. Guys, get out of my way. She's so pretty. And then there's all this music
Yeah.
playing, to establish this. You can just tell.
Yeah, yeah, and it's fascinating that that it's Lucas who's the one who like first kind of brings it up, like we can tell how you're looking at
Right.
her, and Mike is honestly confused, like
Yes.
legitimately, he's like, what do you mean? Like he hasn't even thought through all of
Right.
that yet. And then again, we're getting to Stranger Things too, where Dustin and and Lucas are like very obviously competing
Oh, yeah.
for her affection, and it's frustrating to watch.
It really is. And that's one thing that Stranger Things 2 does that just drives me crazy is the they're focusing on all the wrong characters. The ones who
Mm,
are most interesting, we get very, very little time with the most interesting characters. And the ones who are like, the more time that we're spending with these other characters, the less I like them. And I don't think, and I want to make this very clear because I think it's bad criticism when people just like say, oh, I like or I dislike, I like that character, I dislike that character. That doesn't mean if they're a good character or not, right? It doesn't mean if
right.
they're written well. So,
Yeah.
but I think that they're become like Dustin in particular in this season, the more time that we get to spend with him and the way he gets established more and more throughout Stranger Things 2, he's just like feed him to a demigorgon. I don't care anymore. Like I just like I don't understand what we're supposed to do with him. Um, I noticed
I feel
that
like that's what the writers said.
yeah, but they treated him like he is not just like he only is existing for comic relief, but let's just give these extended scenes, like when he sees that Dart has killed the family cat and his
Mhm.
whole thing with his mom, like, like, oh, why did you go over there? And she's like, okay, that whole back and forth where he's just smiling like crazy. Oh, does anybody actually expect that a 14-year-old kid or a 13-year-old kid, however he's supposed to be, would be that calm, cool, suave, and knows exactly how to work his mom, make her laugh in this awkward, uncomfortable, like, okay, mom, blah blah blah, like this whole thing. Like he
Yeah,
is just smirking the entire season.
yeah. And honestly, I really want to talk about that with Dustin feels like he has gotten dumber.
Yes, he's like, that's
Like
exactly
why
it.
he finds this thing, and in the first season he's just like, oh my goodness, this is totally all magical and everything. In the second season he's like, look, I discovered a new species, it's definitely not related to what happened 6 months ago or a year ago.
Do you remember the Simpsons clip show when like people are like writing in to like Troy McClure and then like the one guy writes in and he's like, I think Homer gets dumber every season. And then Troy McClure's like, that's not a question, doctor. Because it was like
Yeah.
a psychologist or something who wrote in. And it's just like, that's all that I'm thinking with Dustin. That's exactly it. It's like, we need to make him funnier. Like, because like he had some good funny moments in Stranger Things 1. So let's just make him entirely a comedic character. And then we're going to give lots and lots of scenes with him where he's just being silly and over the top. And then it's like, I think Dustin is getting dumber as it goes on. That's not a question.
Yeah.
That's just true. He is. I don't even think it's a question.
Yeah, no, it's oh my goodness. And here's the thing. I really like there are certain aspects of Dustin that I still really like, but I feel like all the parts of Dustin that I like are related to the actor and not to the character.
Okay.
Like I love that he's, like he does that thing,
Yeah.
like showing off his teeth. I think
Yeah.
that's, great. Um, but like that's not something that I don't know, that I feel is like it's not relevant to the story too much.
Right.
It's just something that like would have happened to the actor, and they're like, yeah, let's put that into the show.
Yeah.
And that's the best part. How is that the best part?
Right. I hear you. I like that. I like that aspect. And I also like when he and Steve Harrington have their little interaction about how does Steve get his hair the way he gets it. because
Yeah.
Dustin and like the whole thing of like trying to learn about girls, I'm like, oh well, that was genuine.
Yeah.
That was Stranger Things 1,
Yeah.
where it was like that's how most early teens learn how to interact with a girl. They talk to somebody who's a few years older, who's got a little bit of experience, because they're not going to go to their parents. They're not going to try to learn things necessarily from like TV and movies, like they might, but it's not going to be effective. You need that interaction. So I thought that was good. But then the thing is, trying to then get him, like in the first season, then he is in a lot of ways uh, a frightened character, right?
Mhm.
That like he's a little cowardly,
Yeah.
in Stranger Things 1. But in this one, he's so dumb he doesn't even recognize when he's in danger, right?
Yeah.
He's just constantly just just going about things. Just he's smiling the entire season.
Yeah. And I mean, the final episode is a good indicator of that as well, with them being like with him constantly being like demidogs, and I'm like, yeah, that's a great name for them. And then another character is like, is that really the important question right now?
Right,
Which of
right,
course it's not. I think it's great that Dustin is saying demidogs and like trying to correct people and get them to use his language for them. But I don't think we needed that moment of pausing and being like, having a character in universe actually stop and be like, is that really the important question? You can let Dustin do that, but it doesn't need to be a whole moment. Do you know
right.
what I mean?
Uh-huh. I do. I do. Um, so all right, let's get into the sound editing, and then as
Yes.
part of that, then we'll talk about these new characters. So I just made a couple notes because I went through episode 1 of Stranger Things 2 again. So I just reviewed a couple different parts. At the very beginning, and let me just run through the moments that I've noticed with sound editing. Then we'll talk about it.
Mhm.
When they first go to the arcade, then you get this, oh, that amazing 80s song, Whip It by Devo, right? Da,
Yeah.
da, 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 Whip It, right? Like when they go to the arcade to really establish this is the 80s, this is an arcade, how cool is this? Then when Mad Max and Billy show up, then you get the song Rock You Like a Hurricane. And then he
Yeah.
opens the door, and then his boot makes a thud as it hits the concrete parking lot. I,
Yeah, I,
I
I
feel
just rewatched this after you told me about it. It's so bad. It's
it's
such
so
a
bad.
loud thud. Like it's
It's
not like
so
a
bad.
like boom. It's like a boom. Like what?
Right. Because they have just told you everything you need to know about this character from that, and then as if we didn't need like any extra help, then he walks by, and then you get these like the three girls who are staring, oh, look at the butt on him, and oh my goodness, who's that? And it's like, yeah, we get it. You already made his boot make a thud noise. He showed
Yeah.
up driving a Camaro with playing, Rock You Like a Hurricane. He's dressed like Bon Jovi. He's got like one button done up on his shirt. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like he's just like a denim monster. Like,
Yeah.
come on.
And I mean, I don't even understand, what are they looking at? Like, oh, look at his butt. I'm like, is there anything in particular that's like nice about his? Like,
I,
I don't get
I
it.
don't get it either. But the thing is, we know that they like. How do we know that they're attracted to him? Because they say I'm attracted to him. Like
Yeah.
that's how lazy the writing is, and that's what drives me crazy with it. Um, I'm trying so hard not to like curse because it's so frustrating. But it's like in John Wick, the legend of John Wick, which is I saw him kill, what was it, three guys with a pencil,
Yeah.
right? And then it's like with a pencil. All that I can think now, Stranger Things 2, is like he made a thud noise with his boot. With his boot. Do you know how cool Billy is? With his boot, he can make cement go boom with his boot. That's how cool he is. Oh, thanks, showrunners. I never would have known he was a cool character if it wasn't for you. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. Then um, continuing on, when Max enters the classroom, then you get this, ridiculous. I don't even know. I'm not sure what the song is. I didn't take enough time to get into that. But when she enters the classroom and all four boys turn around and just stare at her for way too long, right? And you've got this music playing, and then that music continues on as Joyce and Bob then go into the closet. So you get that. Now, this is jumping ahead because I know that there were a couple other moments where it just drove me crazy in this season. It was the horrible. Is it episode 7? Yeah, it's episode 7, right? Yeah, the horrible episode 7 with the weirdos when 11 first gets to Chicago. Then it's like she's in the city. Okay, you got to play whatever song to establish that she's here in the city. Like, and it's all these 80s hits that they're playing throughout. It's not the soundtrack that we got in season 1. It's all of these, like, remember how cool the 80s were?
And we had talked about this when we discussed Stranger Things, where it's like, well, it needs to be set in the 80s, and it's important that it's set in the 80s, and it's not this, retro trip down memory lane or anything. And then this Stranger Things 2 just completely undoes it. Like, it is exactly just, hey, remember the 80s? Remember the 80s? Like, it's just trying to take you down memory lane.
That's right.
And it's so frustrating because it's just like, I get it. They are in the 80s. Stop hitting me in the head.
Right. It's trying to exploit this nostalgia and to show that these are the... Go ahead.
Even the sign out front on their lawn that says, whatever it was,
Reagan Bush.
Reagan Bush 84. Yeah. I'm like, okay, I get it. Yeah, they are Republicans. We get it. This is the suburbs in middle America.
Right. And in the 84 election, then Reagan won almost every state. I'm not kidding. It was one of the biggest wins ever. So it's like everybody was for Reagan Bush in 84. What are you guys talking about? But
oh man, it's so over the top. It's like we already knew that about, the parents anyway. That's not new information. It's literally just...
But even if they did that, I wouldn't have an issue with the lawn signs if that was it. But it's all of the music on top of that. Because at least the lawn sign is to some degree subtle. As long as you don't get a zoom in sound effect on it. But
right.
But then episode 7, then 11, she gets there, and then you get the music, and then she goes and the freaks that she's hanging out with, I mean that because they're 80s freaks, right? With their hair and everything, right? So the freaks that she's hanging out with, that they do the makeover on her, and then you get that super cool 80s song to establish that 11 is now super cool, and then to really establish it that she's bitchin'. Okay. And then you get a slow-mo exit of them walking out of there. That slow-mo is so bad. I'm sure this is a parody. This is a parody, right? This is Scary Movie. This is not Scream.
This honestly, it brings me back to our Star Wars discussion, where it feels like it's fan fiction. All of Stranger Things 2 feels like fan fiction.
I was going to say that, but I think that fan fiction is a lot better than this. I really do. I thought about that ahead of time. I'm like, but fan fiction, I think, is better than this. This is because it's...
It feels like, oh, we have a bigger budget, so now we can afford more 80s songs. Let's throw as many of them in as we can.
Yes. I think that's it. And then the one, I would say, maybe the worst offender, except for the boot. The boot, I think, is the one that just I can't take. But maybe the biggest offense in this would be when Nancy and Mike's mom, when I think it's episode 9, I want to say 8 or 9. Then when you get Billy, who goes, and it is Billy, right? Or is it Bobby?
I have no idea.
Anyway, Mad Max's brother.
Said his name once.
Right. So when he shows up because he's looking for his sister. So she's in the bathtub reading a romance novel. So you get the music kind of corresponding with that. But it's it's not exactly that, because there's this bad use of both diegetic and non-diegetic sound throughout Stranger Things 2. So she's playing first. You get the non-diegetic of that dreamy music that she's in the bathtub having this nice bubble bath reading her romance novel while her fat slob of a husband is sleeping in the other room. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe he's not a slob, but like lazy, you know, like boring, you know, mid manager.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Middle manager, you know, boring, like with his glasses, and he's overweight, and he just doesn't really have any ambitions
Yeah.
besides like coming home, having a beer, and like reading the paper and then falling asleep. That's
Yep.
basically him.
Caricature. Yep.
Yes, he's a caricature. Exactly. So she's there dreaming of this, you know, rippled, you know, young man, like with the long hair who like she's wearing her like bustier and like they're on a hilltop, right? All these romance novel covers, right?
Mm.
Then the doorbell's going, and then like you get the actual music that she's listening to, which I forget what it is, but it's I don't know, some sentimental 80s song that's playing. And then she goes downstairs and then opens the door, and then it turns into a full-on romance film, like but like not romance, it like erotica film. Like it really is. It's
Yeah.
it's erotica. It's like a soft core like pornographic film that we are suddenly
Yes.
in. It literally
It's
becomes just a softcore pornographic film of him standing at the door. I didn't know that Nancy had a sister. Oh my, Nancy's not my type. But like, oh my, oh.
we that honestly, I feel like the original version of it had her saying like, "You can step into the house and look for her if you want." Like, you know what I mean? It's just
It's
that's
it's
all that's
so
missing for
yeah,
it to be
it's so horrible. Like I really like I was so frustrated with this entire season, and I remember when I first watched that scene, I was just livid. I was just like, I'm done with this show because like if this and
Mm.
especially if this carries on into Stranger Things 3, like I mean, let me just point this out. Consider this for a moment. Just humor me. How old is Billy?
Uh, 17, I
I
want to
want to say
say.
17 as well.
Yeah.
Isn't this funny how she's a pedophile? Yeah, you're right. Totally funny. Right?
Uh,
Like, I don't get this. Isn't it great how her husband's sleeping in the other room? And it's like, oh, we're going to play this for romance and erotica and to some degree for comedy. And like, there's going to be all this sexual tension between them. And the thing that drives me crazy about this season is that it's the timing of when they introduce all these elements. A lot of them I think just don't belong in the season at all or in this
right.
show. Not even in the
Yeah.
season, just in the show. They don't belong there. You could have those things that are happening in the bigger story world, but they shouldn't
Mhm.
show up in the plot, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so okay, I can even buy that this whole thing happens between Mrs. Wheeler and Billy. Okay, fine. That's maybe happening within the story universe. But within the plot of this, demi-gorgons or demi-dogs are all over the place. Do you know what I mean? Like you are
Yeah.
in the final battle. 11 just showed up. Let's take a few minutes away to see Mrs. Wheeler in the bathtub and then Billy showing up and see all of the sexual tension between these two. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the perfect time to do it. And episode 7, the biggest issue with it is when it shows up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's uh, I I really want to get into episode 7, but first, yes, with this whole thing, I want to be clear about one thing, because I feel like some people, I mean, I doubt that anybody who would care is actually watching this, but some people would be like, oh, would you still be saying that if it were, you know, a husband looking at a younger girl? Yes, I would
Yeah,
still be saying the
me
exact
too.
same thing. It does not matter. Like, I just want to be clear about
If you
that.
had some yeah, like let's like because absolutely like if you flip it, so have some frumpy middle-aged housewife who's not in good shape, she's sleeping in the other room, some like really fit middle-aged guy answers the door who's married to like this frumpy woman who cares about her, and then it's Nancy's really hot best friend who's like she's a junior, maybe even a senior, but under 18, who shows up.
Right.
And then it's like right in the middle of that last episode. And then it's like, hey, how are you doing? Oh, I'm good. How are you? Come on in, right? And it's like, yeah, I'd still be pretty damn pissed off with this because this doesn't
Yeah.
belong here. What the hell?
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So I just wanted to be clear about
Yes,
that.
even if it
But
was flipped with genders, yes, it still
it's
sucks.
still awful. Okay. With episode 7, I think you are absolutely right. Its placement is terrible, especially because the season starts off with us being like, oh, there's like this some other,
Yeah,
person with powers. That
yeah,
seems really, really cool. Let's explore that. Never mind, the next 6 and 3/4 episodes are not going to talk about it. Just not even going to reference it. Like we're not going to see any of that at all, and that's so infuriating because I'm like, wow, Stranger Things 2 is going to be really interesting as we explore. How many of these experiments
sure.
are there? With there
Yeah,
being 11 and then 8, so then are there, like
9, 10. Is there, yeah, like
yeah,
any before that? Did they
yeah,
continue with 12 at a different facility?
exactly. I feel like that could be a really interesting aspect, but
Yep,
instead we go back to seeing, baby demigorgons or demi-dogs.
yep.
We see Will still suffer with, like PTSD as they describe it, which is an accurate description, except
Yeah,
that it's not the full story.
right, because it's actually going on. Yes. Yep.
Um, Yeah, and honestly, I think that would be really, really fascinating if it was just PTSD. That would be really
Right.
interesting. But instead, then they're like, oh, no, 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 it's PTSD, but it's still going on, so it's not really PTSD.
Yeah,
I'm
they're
like,
not
but
flashbacks. He's actually having visions of things that are happening in the present. And that's what I mean.
right,
Like, yeah, because like I just want to make that clear. Like, you know, it's not diminishing PTSD. Like, it's not, oh, if it was just PTSD, right? But
right.
it's that if it was solely PTSD. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, then I think that that would be like a really, really interesting aspect
right.
to the story, a really interesting plot. Um, but we don't get that. We we
Right.
don't focus on
No,
that.
we don't get that.
Um, we're spending all these episodes with Elle being locked up in the cabin, which, yes, it's horrible that she's being locked up in the cabin the same way that she was locked up in the facility. But we didn't spend 6 episodes watching 11 be stuck in the facility.
I hear
We
you.
saw her escape from the facility at the very beginning. Then we had flashbacks to her awful existence in the facility.
Yep.
Why couldn't we do that again with her being in the cabin for a full year?
Yeah.
Like, we could have
Yes.
just gotten like constant flashbacks to that, and that would have been fine. If we had
You are
seen,
so right. Yes,
like, if
100%.
yeah, if Stranger Things 2 had started off with 11 being off on her own and literally nobody knows where she is, or like, whatever, like she leaves in episode 1, right? Like she leaves the cabin in episode 1.
Right.
That would be fantastic because then Hopper would be genuinely concerned about, I don't know where she went, but I don't have time to go look for her.
Right.
And that would be really fascinating. But instead, we get that pushed all the way back. And
Yep.
I mean, it sounds like that. Like I could see how some people could be like, oh, well, now you're talking about like the difference between like audiences being patient and not patient. But no, because then it's tension that's in there. So we are still like they are still expecting us to be patient with Eleven's return.
Yes, whether 11 is going to show back up in Hawkins or when she is going to, at what point will she come in? Because you know that she's going
Yeah.
to come in to help her friends. But yes, and like you're kind of denying the audience the entire time. Because
Mhm.
instead, it's like the opposite of that. It's that she's right there in town. And
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah, and then, but instead, then they had to throw in that stupid, love triangle subplot, so that's the reason that she runs away. They had to, they had to do all these things, and then everything got shoved into episode 7, which it
Hmm.
would have been interesting to see that spread out too.
I agree. I
Just
think episode 7, if it was split up into little parts and then it was dispersed throughout the season, I
yeah,
don't think people would complain. I don't think people would have an issue with it.
because it feels so concentrated, so rushed that, oh, okay, 11 is now in the city. Now she, is becoming a bad guy. Now she is, doing this. And never mind, she's already, decided to become a good guy again.
Right.
Like, all of that happens in one episode where that should have been the arc for the season.
Yes.
Instead, we get 5 episodes or 6 episodes of her, being like, I want to leave, I want to leave, I want to leave, I want to leave. And then she leaves and then comes back immediately. It doesn't work.
Right. It doesn't. It so doesn't work. Because yeah, and I want to point this out. Part of the issue, like I think it was a bad idea to have it all in one episode. That entire subplot with 11 and 8 and all of that and trying to track down people from the program. Like I didn't really have an issue with the story, but I have a huge issue with it being an entire episode. And then in particular, the last image that you get in episode 6 is the demi-dog's claw coming up to the top of the pit, and then like kind of pulling itself up, and Hopper's on the other side with the new doctor and all of that, and they're just like watching this and it's like, whoa, like these things, like they're just gonna invade like crazy, like they're all
Yeah.
coming, and then it's like, let's just, meanwhile with 11 in Chicago where there's no tension. There's
Yeah.
none. It's that
Yeah.
you go from like, I really want to know what's going to happen. And so it took the entire thing of binge viewing and it threw it out the window, because
Yeah.
that approach would work. People still wouldn't like it, but it would work on traditional television where you're releasing one episode a week. Because the thing is, you're already going to have to wait a week because like the claw shows up and then it's like you can't click for the next episode immediately. It's not going to start in 5 seconds or 15 seconds, right?
Right.
I think Stranger Things is 5 seconds, right? Because it's an actual Netflix show.
Yeah,
Do you
I
know what I
think
mean?
so.
Because
Yeah.
like older shows, it's 15 seconds, but the newer ones, it's 5 seconds.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, it's not going to start in 5 seconds, and then you can continue like watching the episode. If this was a traditional network television show, it's like the claw shows up, you're going to have to wait a full week, and then a full week goes by, you tune in again, and you're trying to even remember where things left off. So
Right.
then if you go somewhere else, if you take this big departure in the story, and then you're just like, okay, we're going to go and explore these other characters right now, and then for our penultimate season finale, then we'll come back to the claw and continue from that moment. But the thing is like, you jerks, I can just skip forward. I'm going to
Yeah.
resent this episode so much because I can look at the episode description on Netflix. I can see what it says. Oh, it's going to be all 11 and this whole like other side story with her and 8. And then it's like, episode 8 is going to continue on with Hopper and everybody else trying to stop these demi-dogs from invading. It's like, well, I just resent the entire episode because I know what's going to happen in this entire season.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's so frustrating, and you are absolutely right. And it's something that The Walking Dead has been struggling with, as we've
Yes.
talked about before.
Yeah.
Where you get these random episodes that are isolated from the rest, but because of the way that people watch The Walking Dead,
Yeah. Because it's still, even though it's cable television, but it's traditional television. It's one
yeah,
episode a week. You don't get, like, a lot of people watch The Walking Dead by binging, but they're still getting a lot of actual live viewers or
yeah,
PVR viewers the week of, who are then waiting until the next episode.
for sure.
But Stranger Things is a Netflix show, and that's what's so great about season 1 is season 1 exploits that to great advantage. It's that the entire thing feels like a movie, one single story that you need to binge watch to fully enjoy, right? Whereas season 2 is like, it's taking this huge step back. It's like going to network television, and it's like, this sucks. This is why like we stopped watching network television. This is why people started binge watching on Netflix.
Yeah, honestly, my rewrite of Stranger Things 2 would involve 11 leaving end of episode 1, and it would have been a big deal because she leaves Hawkins, right? And then we get, like a little bit of her in episodes 2, 3, maybe 4, and then we don't see her again for like 2 or 3 episodes. And that makes her return at the end of episode 8 so much more powerful
Yes.
because we haven't seen her in so long. We haven't seen her in like 4 hours. And
Yep.
then she shows up and we go, yeah,
Yep.
Eleven's back.
Yep.
But, like something as simple as that just would have made it so much more enjoyable.
Right. Right.
um,
Um, I do want to talk a little bit more with the sound editing. Can you like, and specifically why I hate it with these characters? Um,
mhm.
but can you explain, like, because you had a good example that I didn't think of. It was something to do with like the car headlights.
Yeah, so when Billy or whatever his name is shows up to the buyer's house in episode 8 or 9, whatever it is, um, and he has his whole showdown with Steve,
Hmm.
and he shows up, he turns off the car engine, the lights, like his headlights turn off, and then there's a sound effect of like boom. I'm like, what? What are you doing? I don't understand. It's like, oh no, he's here. Oh no, he's getting out of the car. Oh no, like I I get it. He's there. He's bad. This is not good news for our characters. You don't need to hit me over the head.
Right. And that's the thing, is that it has no respect for the character, for the viewer's patience or intelligence. And that's the thing that drives me crazy, is like, I can forgive a lot of things in a movie or a TV show, especially if it's an independent production where I know they don't have a huge production budget. Like, there's a lot of things that I can forgive. If the costumes are not great, or even if like the lighting is not perfect, or even if the sound is not perfect, I can forgive a lot of those things if the special effects aren't quite where they need to be. But as long as you continue to respect my intelligence, right? That the technical aspects, and I'm like, yeah, there are certain limitations within this medium of film. Film is crazy expensive. And so if you're a great writer, if you are a great filmmaker, but you just don't have a lot of resources, then that's fine. I can overlook a lot of those things. But the one of the things that I cannot overlook is when you treat me like a moron. The second I feel like you have no respect for my intelligence, uh, you've lost me. And that's the thing, is with all of this, with all of the sound editing, it is such lazy writing, because instead of establishing who these characters are, they let the music or the sound effect do everything for you. Instead of establishing
Yeah.
what this scene is, the tone for this scene. Like, are we supposed to be feeling suspense right now? Or are we supposed to be laughing? Are we supposed to, be like confused? Like, they spell it out all for you through sound.
Yeah, and I mean there are so many moments that like really stood out to me. For the longest time I couldn't pinpoint exactly what the issue was. I wasn't sure, like I wasn't confident that it was the sound editing because a lot of the early times when, you get some of those sound effects, then they are all done in a jump scare style.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And it's really really frustrating because we had talked before about how like there are no jump scares in Stranger Things 1, like, or very few of them at the
There's a
very least.
couple, but there's very few.
Yeah, and then at the beginning of Stranger Things 2, again, where we spend 5 episodes without there being like any Demigorgon or anything going on, then we get these constant, like building of the orchestra,
Yep.
like these, random loud sound effects as we cut to see,
Yep.
sometimes a bird fly off. There's literally a moment, if I am remembering correctly, where Hopper is going through a cornfield, and it's like this really tense moment, and then there's a sound effect, and nothing appears on screen. There's not even a bird. It's
Right.
literally just boom.
Yeah.
What was I supposed to think there? Like he suddenly got scared by the wind? Like there was nothing there, but they wanted you to kind of jump.
Yep.
even though there was nothing to jump about. And it's so frustrating because I'm like, that's not why people watch Stranger Things.
Right. It's trying to manipulate people and not, um, you know, these are not earned scares or tone or anything. Like you're not doing
Yeah.
all of the things that you need to, that everything that cinema offers, that film itself offers, you're not doing all of those. You're doing the laziest form of it. This is all shorthand. It's okay, well, we want this to be ominous. So what do we do? Well, if we can't actually make this ominous, like if your scene doesn't work without the music, it's probably not a very good scene.
Yeah,
Like, or without a sound
honestly.
effect. Like, that if we don't know who this character is without having that theme song, that sound effect, then you haven't done a good enough job of establishing them as a character. And
Yeah.
it's not once or twice, it is constant throughout this season. And I mean, like,
Yeah.
every character, like, which characters in this do you think are necessary, like really help the story? In because we get a
Uh,
lot of new characters. Like, do you want me to just briefly go through them?
yeah, in terms of new characters? Uh, sure. Yeah.
So, like, we get Mad Max, okay?
Yeah, I could see the case for her being necessary. She, but no.
She's totally unnecessary. There's nothing about this other than let's exploit the fact that a lot of 13-year-olds watch this show. So what do they want? They want this romantic subplot. They want a love triangle. We don't know what to do with Dustin and Lucas, right? So we know what to do with
Yeah.
Will in this season. Will is going to be tormented by everything from the upside down, and specifically like the big bad monster, whatever it is. So he's going to be tormented. Mike desperately misses 11 and he's just longing for her the entire time.
Yeah.
Lucas and Dustin, what do we do with them? Um, um, why don't we introduce a girl? Perfect. That's what we'll do.
Yeah.
That's all that it is. Like, you get a little bit with, okay, well, Dustin finds Dart. Okay, so then, like, him and Lucas maybe are, you know, examining this thing, like
Yeah,
exploring it.
that could honestly be really, really interesting if they are keeping it from Mike and Will, because they're like,
Yeah,
oh, those two guys have too much going on.
exactly.
Like, let's figure out what this thing is by ourselves. But
Right.
instead, it is instantly Dustin things. Oh, I discovered a new species. It's going to be my pet. Let's name it and everything. Like, it's not, let's figure out what it is. It's,
That's what I'm saying is that
uh,
if you actually had Lucas and Dustin doing that as their own little subplot, and
mhm.
then you've already got Will who's tormented and Mike is at his side. But
Yeah,
instead, what is the function of Mad Max? The function of her is to desperately try to get her up to speed on what's going on so that way maybe she'll fall in love with one of these guys and kiss them, right?
right.
That, like, they're
And it,
trying to
and
impress her the entire time.
and it's honestly that is such a sequel move
Yes.
where it's something that no no TV series that
You
respects your
got it.
intelligence that wants you to actually be watching all of it, which I mean I can't imagine anybody hopping in to Stranger
Stranger
Things
Things 2
2
without having
without
watched
having
one.
seen Stranger Things 1. So this honestly it feels like the beginning of a sequel where they're like, oh, we need a
Yes.
new character in order to get all this description of to catch the audience up on what happened in the first one. It's like you don't need that. You really
100%. You
don't.
see what I'm saying? You are exactly right because that's exactly the function of Mad Max. It's to
Yeah.
catch it's so that way she can get caught up and therefore the audience can get caught up, which is what a sequel does because the sequel is thinking, well, not everybody has seen the original and we're going to release this in the theater. So, and I understand why executives think that way because I don't think they're necessarily wrong. If you're out with a
Yeah.
group of people and let's say 6 out of 8 of them have seen the original, but 2 of them have not, and everybody wants to go and see a movie, and 6 people really want to go and see this sequel, but 2 of them haven't seen it, then it's like, well, don't worry, we'll put enough in there with having a new character in the film so that way other characters have to explain to that character what happened in the first one, and it's really just a device to then explain that to people who have not seen the original. That's the function of Mad Max, but you're just frustrated the entire time going, we know what happened. Who cares if she knows or not?
Yeah, one thing that I'd like to bring up, I don't think that it's really unnecessary that Max and Billy, or whatever his name is,
It is Billy.
come.
I double checked.
Oh, okay. It's really unnecessary that they come from California. They could have already been living in Hawkins, not known what happened in the first season. You know, Billy takes the opening that Steve Harrington has kind of left, through his whatever happened where he's not the big shot anymore and he's been replaced by Billy. That could still happen even if Billy was there in season one. Max could have just been some girl that they didn't notice before, and all of a sudden they start to get interested in her. Like, it's completely it really feels like the characters were shoehorned in, where it's like, oh, we need new characters. Well, why weren't they in the first one? They're from out of town.
But even out of town would be
Like,
fine. But why did they choose
yeah,
California? They chose it for Poochie reasons. Poochie from The
yes,
Simpsons. How could we want to make him cool? How do we make him cool? Well,
totally tubular.
yeah, give him a skateboard, right? Like Poochie has a skateboard in The Simpsons, and it's like that's how we know that he's
Yes,
cool because he skateboards. That literally happens in the first episode. It's she's so cool, like she skateboards. Girls don't skateboard, she does. Therefore, she's cool. Like I forget the
yeah,
exact line, but they say they're staring. Like Lucas and Dustin are staring at her, and then going, "Oh, well, that's why she's so cool because she skateboards, and she must surf, and she's from California, and therefore she's cool." Just like Poochie. How do you make him cool? Give him sunglasses and like make them dark sunglasses, right? Because he's
right,
from a sunny place. Therefore, he wears sunglasses all the time and he skateboards. He's cool. That's what they've
yeah.
done. But yeah, so I've got issues. I have huge issues with Mad Max. I'm going to bring up some others in a minute here.
Mm.
Billy. Is Billy necessary?
No, he is the worst thing ever.
Right. Right. There's so much.
I hate him.
Yeah. Like, and I guess I'll do this
I
now.
hate his inclusion. I should clarify. I hate his inclusion in the series
He's a
because,
terrible character, and
yeah.
these two in particular are really bad because I've pointed it out a few times on the podcast that I think one of the most difficult things, one of the most difficult tasks for a writer is to establish a character as being villainous or unlikable and then somehow redeem them to the audience and to the characters within the story and make them likable. Get us to start rooting for that character because they go through a change or we learn enough about their backstory. But that is so hard to do. I think that it happened with Steve Harrington, and we talked about that in the first one, where
Hmm.
Steve was very villainous. He was very unlikable, whether he
Yeah,
is, breaking Jonathan's camera or whether he is, spray painting, that Nancy is, a whatever. I forget exactly, like, but, he like has some kind of like slur against her that he puts on
yeah,
like the movie theater marquee. And so he's an unlikable character. He fights Jonathan and all of that. But then by the end of it, when he chooses not to cowardly run away, but to go in and help them, even though he's not invested in this, he doesn't have anyone who is personally involved. He doesn't have a sibling who's been attacked or who's disappeared. He doesn't have a best friend the way Nancy does, right? Like he's the only one who's not personally involved who goes in, and we did talk about this before because Hopper is doing this kind of in part to redeem his to save his daughter where he couldn't save her,
hmm,
right? So that's how Hopper's connected. But then he actually goes in, Steve Harrington does, even though he doesn't really have anything invested. And then when he and Nancy are together at the very, very end, and then you find out that, he bought the camera for Jonathan, he is trying to undo the wrongs that he's done. And he also doesn't hang out with the same nitwits anymore. Those
yeah,
dunderheads that he was hanging out with, he has this fight with them. He doesn't want to be like them. And so he does get redeemed, and then
Mhm.
he remains a very likable character in season 2 because he's actually taking care specifically of Dustin, Lucas, and Mad Max when everybody else has forgotten about them. Like no
Yeah.
one else is paying attention to them, but Steve is there for them. So okay, but that took an entire season to first establish him as being unlikable, because it took a little while before he becomes unlikable.
Hmm.
Like, you're not sure what to think of him at first.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not saying he starts out as likable. It's just you're
Right. Yeah.
unsure.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah. It takes like two, like by the end of like the second episode, maybe the third one, or yeah, I guess probably the beginning of the third one, then
yeah,
you really are like, okay, yeah, he's an awful guy.
right. And so you get that with Steve, but then it takes all the way until the end of it
Hmm.
before he gets redeemed.
But it's a
But
gradual
it is.
shift.
It
Yeah.
is. It's not one moment. And it's really
Yeah.
not until the very end that I think most viewers are going to say, all right, yeah,
Yeah.
actually, because there are several different key moments that kind of slowly pull him along. Now, Mad Max and Billy, they try to do the same thing with both of these characters, but they have no patience, and they don't expect us to have any patience. They
Yeah.
do it in the worst way possible. Mad Max comes in, and the thing is that she is so rude. She's so rude to everybody, right? And then it's like, so I don't think that we're supposed to look at her and then just say, wow, she's so likable. We're totally on her side. We don't have sympathy for her either. Because when 11 shows up, we've got a lot of sympathy because it's like something's really wrong with her. We don't know exactly what it is. The more backstory you get, the more you're like, oh, wow. Oh, that's awful. Oh, this poor
Yeah.
thing. Mad Max, you're just like, oh, so you are just too cool for this group, too cool for this school, too cool for this state. You resent everybody. You're better than everybody. And then it's like, oh, but secretly underneath, it's because her brother's really mean to her. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I think that it would have worked better if, if she had just had a different expression on her face, as crazy as that may sound. Because like, if she had been like, like I don't know how to describe like how she would look, but even if she said things like, "Just leave me alone,"
Yeah,
like or whatever, but instead she's like, "Stop staring at me like stalkers," and everything,
yeah,
and it's too harsh. If it was just leave me alone, and
right,
she's like constantly trying to be by herself, then that would be interesting, but we don't see how she is around anybody else. We
right.
literally just see that the gang, the party,
Yeah,
is constantly watching her, but we don't see what she's actually doing ever.
right. And the thing is that she's even too cool for this show. And here's this
Mm.
like horrible moment of writing that you get when Lucas gets her in that back room of the arcade by bribing that Cheetos, like
Yeah,
acne dude.
yeah,
But that when he gets her in there and then he explains the whole story, even though he shouldn't do this, right? But he tells her the whole story. Well, then it turns into metafiction, right? It
yeah,
becomes a story. She's a character who's aware of herself as being part of a story, right? Like, or a story that's aware of itself as a piece of fiction, right? It's
yeah,
metafiction. So she is too cool for this show. You get all of the things that the critics have pointed out, that the show is derivative, right? And
mm.
she's like, cool. Oh, yeah, that was a great story. It's a bit derivative in parts, but blah, blah, blah. Which is like, you could have pulled that from any like critical review of season 1, where they would have said, oh, it's derivative of, like Spielberg 80 stuff or Stephen King stories or whatever else, right? They would
Yeah,
say that. Okay, I want to say they're 13 at this point. Is that fair?
yeah. I think that's about accurate.
Okay. So I I can say this as somebody who has taught middle school and high school for a long time. I guarantee you cannot find a 13-year-old who can spontaneously and accurately use the word derivative. F you, you can't find one. It's the worst writing in the world. And specifically, even if you can, because like legitimately, there might be 13. I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are plenty of 13-year-olds who do know what derivative means, right? That like you see like these kids in like the Scripps National Spelling Bee, right? Like those kids, like they've got their vocabulary is incredible, right? Like they know far more words than I know, and I've got a pretty good background in English, but they know the usage of it, they know the spelling, all of that. So there's plenty. There legitimately are.
Yeah.
A girl from California who plays video games all the time, like that's where she's spending her time. She's not reading, you know. She's not a bookworm. She isn't, you know, getting deep into critical literary theory or film theory. And, you know, she skateboards a lot. And then she comes from this really tough background with a broken home and an abusive older brother, like a stepbrother, all of that. She doesn't know what derivative means, but critics have labeled the show derivative. Therefore, it becomes this moment of metafiction. So she's just this lazy stand-in to address critics. In that moment, she is.
Yeah, you know, I again, like, I want to rewrite her character just slightly, because I think that it introduces something that could be interesting. It's not at all interesting in its execution, but it could be. And if they had, again, like, had her be, you know, just a part of the class before, and, you know, I don't know, maybe if they found out that she was like doing really well on like some of these scientific things, and then they had to like approach her about, you know, like some questions that they had about Dart.
Oh, sure.
That would,
There you go.
that would be a Yeah, that would be a great way to introduce her. Maybe she's not into video games. Maybe she doesn't, you know, skateboard, and they have to try to get her to be a little bit cooler, you know, as part of the party and everything, introducing her to video games rather than her just being like, I'm better than you guys anyway.
Right.
Like, it would have been a way better character.
Right. You're absolutely right. Because the thing is, she wants. Go ahead.
And then Mike would have been, you know, more justified in his fear of bringing her into part of the party, because she would have actually been a legitimate threat of replacing somebody, you know?
Yes. That's exactly it. That would have done it. Instead, she doesn't want to be part of the group, and then they are desperate to pull her into the group. So it's just frustrating the plot of the entire season.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying, because like there's story, everything that's going on, and then plot, what we actually see on screen, she just is constant. Is she advancing the plot? No, she's doing the complete opposite. She's pulling away from the plot being moved forward.
Yeah.
Right? She is like, it's
she's being told the plot.
Exactly.
As the plot is going on.
Right. And then with her brother or stepbrother, whatever he is, then it's like the writing that his dialogue is so terrible. This is just a little nitpicky thing, but like they try to redeem him where it's like you see that, oh, but then his dad is abusive to him. So therefore all is forgiven. And now we can be like, oh, he's actually great. Except, of course, nobody thinks that. So I don't understand what was the point of that. It's like, okay, no duh. Like, what is this? Like Psych 101? That bullies are typically bullied in some other instance, and that's why they turn to bullying? Like, gasp. You should write like an essay on this. I didn't know. Has no one ever looked at this before? Why do people bully? Why are people jerks? Like, what the hell are they doing with this?
Yeah, I honestly don't know. Like the fact that he, you know, breaks down into tears. I'm like I I'm sorry, but if this has been going on for however long, he's not going to be crying for this one particular instance of, you know, being pushed against a shelf. As sad as that is, in real life, like you eventually cry yourself out.
That's
and
right.
You don't cry over those things anymore. And it does seem like this has been a thing that has been going on forever. That's what is implied to the audience. Right. And yeah, and the fact that he's, I don't know, it's so frustrating to see him to just being like, oh, I have a date tonight. Like, did he expect that to actually work? Clearly, has never worked before. It's not going to work now. Like, why is he doing that? Right. Like, I don't know. There's so much that's lacking from his character that
Yeah,
makes him into this caricature, and
that's
it's
yes.
so frustrating. And immediately after that scene where we're supposed to be like, oh, he has a hard life at home,
Then he
then he
tries to
goes,
seduce a married woman.
yeah.
Oh, great. So you guys tried to start redeeming him because that's what I'm saying. Is like they tried and then it's like they just abandoned it and they turned him into a jackass again. And it's like,
Yeah,
oh, like what was the point of that then? Why did you
right.
show me this thing with his dad if you're then going to show, yeah, but he isn't even doing this. Like if he tried to do something in some way that would get back at his dad, okay, I could understand that. Like he tries to destroy his dad's car or something like that because he's angry. Okay, fine. So we kind of get why he's destructive and where it's coming from. Instead, it's just, oh, you're just going to go and like destroy a marriage. Perfect.
Yeah.
That yeah, yeah. And like the whole thing, like where it's like he's sort of on Steve's side, kind of that he's trying to get Steve to like toughen up and to be cool again or whatever. It's so inconsistent because like these
Yeah.
weird scenes where they're playing basketball together, then at one point then they're playing basketball and then like he goes after Steve and he like knocks him over, but then because Steve didn't have his feet planted, then it's not actually a charge within
Right.
basketball as far as a foul call, right? So then
Yeah.
when they're fighting later on, and he tells him afterwards in the shower, he's like, plant your feet next time, take the charge, like basically be tough, and that's how you'll be better, right? But
Right.
then when they're fighting in that last episode, then he pushes him. Steve planted his feet. And then he's like, I told you to plant your feet to take the charge. And I'm like, he just did. It's like, it's such bad writing. It's so frustrating. It's like he just did the thing you told him to do. And now you're criticizing him for not doing it when he just did it. It's just, I,
Yeah.
whoever wrote those lines doesn't understand basketball. I'm telling you right
Mm.
now. They don't know the rules. And it just, like, it's at times incompetent. It's staggering that something of this caliber, like a Netflix show of this prestige, can be this poorly written and this poorly executed. It is
Mhm.
staggering to me that and I mean I know that both you and I we do have a background in this, like, but there's literally thousands of film school grads who could do what
Yeah.
we're doing. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's not like we're experts in the industry. Like
Right.
like we want to be more involved in the industry, but like we're not, and we could easily point this stuff out. How do they not have somebody like
Yeah.
vetting the script for this?
Honestly. Okay. Um, we should move on to another new character.
Yeah. So, I guess we could talk about Bob.
What about Bob?
Right. That's a great movie. Do you like that movie?
Honestly. Oh yeah, it's fantastic.
Okay. Yeah. I love that.
Probably
That's a
my favorite Bill Murray
Me
movie.
too. Yeah, legitimately, that's my favorite Bill Murray movie.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Bob. A lot of people don't like Bob as a character. I didn't mind him that much.
He's not that bad. I think that from his first few moments on screen, you can kind of tell he's probably not going to make it through the season. Um, that might just, be me, like with my, tons of experience of watching television shows and everything. But he's such a nice guy that I'm just like,
Mm,
he's not going to make it.
right. Yeah, you can kind of see like a sacrificial death coming because he
Yeah,
is so nice. And he's not this tough guy who's just going to be capable of saving everyone again and again without losing his own life. But I do think that Bob as a character, like a lot of people, I feel like from what I've heard, we're kind of hard on Bob as a character, but not Mad Max or Billy. And I don't get that because I think that he is, of all of the new characters, except for maybe eight, he's the most functional in terms of the plot.
mm,
Uh,
yeah,
that for Joyce, in part because I think it does a fairly clever thing here. I mean, it's not particularly clever, but it is, but it functions. There's clearly something between Hopper and Joyce, right? That
yeah,
part at least has remained subtle, but it's there, right?
yeah,
That, like they did a lot of things wrong in season two, but the relationship between Hopper and Joyce is good. It's still there. Like you see them sharing a cigarette at different
Yeah.
points and things like this, like back when they were in high school. And it's like there's some like right because after she loses Bob, then Hopper's there
Yeah.
to comfort her, but it doesn't turn into this, aggressive romantic gesture where he's trying to take advantage of a grieving woman. Like, because Hopper's a good guy, but he's still there to legitimately care for her. But there's something there because Hopper is unattached, right? At the very beginning of
Mhm.
season one, you see this woman that she spent the night, and then it's like he doesn't like really care about her, it seems,
Yeah.
right? And like same thing with him and the librarian. Then they had this little tryst and like whatever.
Mhm.
But so Hopper is unattached, Joyce is unattached, but you don't want them together right now
Right.
because you've got all this other stuff going on. He's trying to deal with 11, she's trying to deal with Will, and so you can't like you trying to get that is just it's not the right time to bring them together, I think.
Yeah.
So what they want to do is they want to distance it, but what's the best way of distancing it? Well, get Joyce to have some other romantic relationship with somebody who is not unlikable, with somebody who
Yeah.
actually can, because he's such a nice guy, he's the only one who would not necessarily be super creeped out by what happened to Will and to Joyce and the fact that she's really poor and she's now divorced and she's got kids and he is presumably he's never married, he has no children, he's not wealthy but he's not struggling the way she is because she's a single mom and all of that, right? That it's like you
Mhm.
need to have that nice guy who kind of comes along where he was too dorky in high school for her,
Right.
but now she's realizing, oh, he actually is a really good guy. And if I wasn't caught up in all of the cool factor of being a teenager and looking for that as like the biggest metric in choosing a romantic partner is how cool are they? What group do they hang out with? If you kind of get around all of that, then you're like, oh, he's stable, he's committed, he's monogamous, he's all of these things, right? Like he's not abusive, he's comforting, he's all these like great things. um
Yeah.
so then she actually sees it, so I'm like he has a good function there, and also with his whole electronics background working at Radio Shack, functionally within the plot he actually helps advance the plot, right?
Yeah.
It's clunky the way they do it, it's really clunky with the way they do it with the solving the map thing,
Yeah.
right? But he still advances the plot. Mad Max does not advance the plot. Billy does not advance the plot. Bob
Yeah.
at least advances the plot. So he's a good functional character.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree entirely. Like when I say like that, I saw like that he probably wasn't going to make it through the season. It was honestly when he started talking, repeatedly about like, oh yeah, let's move to this other town, let's settle down and like do
Mm,
this, that, and the other.
right,
I'm
right.
just like, that's the kind of thing that can can get you written off pretty quickly because it's like, oh well, we can't have Joyce leave, we can't have Will
Right,
leave, and why
right.
can't they leave? Like,
That's
so
true.
then um, so it was that I felt was like a little bit clunky, but it's I agree that I think that his character is fine. Like the fact that he knows basic and
Yeah,
is able to restart the computer
yeah,
system,
exactly. That's a great example. Yeah.
that's yeah, that's really really great. Like um, it's honestly he is a fine character. I don't want to say he's a great character, but he's a fine character. Like there's nothing really you know offensive about
Right.
him.
And he even encourages Will to confront the monster, thinking that Will is just having a flashback and it's a dream, and saying, like, when I was younger, I was afflicted by this recurring nightmare, and then I confronted
Yeah,
it and it went away. And so that helps advance the plot as well. And it's not even bad advice because he doesn't know that the Upside Down is this real place and that,
yeah,
like, he doesn't know any of that stuff. So it's not bad advice from his perspective, right?
hmm for
And so,
sure.
yeah, yeah, all right. Um, okay. The- there's
I
there's
will say that his death, I think, was done poorly though. We get about like I don't know, like five different fake outs before he finally
yeah,
dies.
yeah,
And that's really, really frustrating to see because it's all of this like, oh man, this one's gonna get get him. This one's gonna get him. Oh no, he forgot the gun. Oh no, now he's gonna
Right.
need the gun. Oh wait, he doesn't need the gun. Oh no, the broom fell. Oh, he's still fine. And
Totally.
then just all of a sudden, like out of nowhere, then a Demogorgon jumps and gets him. And
Yeah.
yeah, that was really, really frustrating. Because I think that it's fine that, like it is satisfying that that his story ends there. That
Yes.
he, went out of his way to make sure that everybody else got out. Everything like that. That was all done really, really well. But then the fact that you do fake out after fake out after fake out,
Good point.
and then he just, gets killed like that out of nowhere is, I don't know. That was really frustrating to me.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's a good point. Um, all right. I guess I'm trying to think of who to talk about next because there's the reporter.
Oh
There's
yes.
the new director of the Hawkins Energy Lab or
Yeah,
whatever
I
it's
want to
called.
talk about him. I forget what his
Sure.
name is, but
I can't remember.
yeah,
I mean, the actor is Paul Reiser, but I don't know the character's name.
his character is absolutely fantastic. I
Yeah.
love him. Like the fact that, like when you start out, then you're like, I don't know about this guy. And he specifically avoids saying, you have to trust me, which I think is really, really important because of course, the doctors in the first one said you have to trust us and
Yeah.
everything. Um, so it's really, really like his character is very well written where he does actually care about Will and he doesn't think that it's like that serious of a situation. I like you genuinely believe watching it that like yeah, he thinks that the stuff that's going on with Will is PTSD and it's nothing more than that. Everybody else is like, oh, we have to like, all the other scientists are like, oh, we just need to not care about the kid and keep this going. And he's like, no, 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 we need to find another solution. He
Right.
is great. I love him as a character.
Yeah, he is good, and that is a character where they did a good job with the character because they do actually. He's written in a way that uh, he is slowly being revealed throughout the season. You don't
Mhm.
actually have the ridiculous music to introduce him, right?
That's
Or
true.
sound
Yeah,
effects. You slowly learn about him, like whether you can trust him or not, because you're suspicious the entire time. But the more we learn, the more we start to trust him. And then you're like, he legitimately is not like this other director. I forget the guy's name, but
Brenner.
Brenner. Yeah, he's not like Brenner. And this character is Sam Owens, by the way.
Okay, yeah.
So yeah, that the more we learn about him, the more we're like, oh, he genuinely does care about Will, even though it would have been far more expedient to just, destroy like all of like the vines and everything else and to just like whatever go after it like but knowing that it's probably going to kill Will that he will not let them do it even though all of the other scientists are saying like whatever it's one boy we need to do this and it's like but he won't let them do that then you're like oh and like I mean and it
Yeah,
continues and continues and continues um
absolutely.
so he's an interesting one and I do think the casting is interesting in this season because you've got him and then you have the reporter now I forget the reporter's name I'll look it up but Paul Reiser he's a comedic actor primarily
Hmm.
like he's done some dramatic roles but he is primarily a comedic actor I mean he's a stand-up comedian. He's like been a very successful stand-up comedian, especially in the 80s. And he did a bunch of like comedy films in the 80s. And then he was the star of one of the biggest sitcoms of the 90s, which is Mad About You. Um,
Okay, yeah.
yeah, so he played, I think, Paul Buckman on that show. That was like legitimately one of the absolute biggest sitcoms of the 90s. And so, yeah, like he's a comedic actor. So it was
Yeah.
when I saw him, I'm like, he's a comedic actor. Like I've seen him do some serious roles. Like he does play a serious role in Whiplash. Have you seen Whiplash?
Yes, I have. I don't
Yeah,
remember his role in it.
he plays the dad of
Oh,
the
okay, yeah,
yeah, like when they go
yeah,
to the movie theater together and he's encouraging him to pour the whatever milk duds in the popcorn.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's Paul Reiser. Anyway, so
Yeah.
so he's a comedic actor, but like anyway, he's fine. But then the really strange one to me is I think it's Brett Gelman. Let me just double check. Um yeah, Brett Gelman, who plays the reporter, and the reporter's name is sorry, hang on. Uh Murray Bauman.
Hmm.
Or Bauman. I think it's Bauman. Anyway, but you know what I'm talking about. The reporter who is investigating the disappearance of um, Barb, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And that's where the entire thing, like, he's a comedic actor as well. He is
Mm.
specifically a comedian. And I mean, I've seen him in a fair number of things. I've listened to him on podcasts, and I think he's really, really funny. That's the problem. He's really funny. And so
Right.
even in this, he does a good job of being kooky. And you can kind of believe him as this kooky tabloid kind of reporter. But this whole thing that he has with Nancy and Jonathan and that whole weird night that they spend together, like,
Yeah.
again, it's like, okay, I don't know, this can
Yeah.
maybe
It
work.
it, it's just like it's just a little bit too much. Like he's too out there because
Yeah,
it takes away from the realism
it
of
does.
the series because you're just like, oh, okay, you've got the crazy reporter, and like, he didn't need to be that crazy or kooky or whatever you want to
Right.
call him. Like, he could have just been toned down a couple of notches, and honestly, probably a different actor.
Yes.
No offense to him, but a different actor would have probably been able to do
There are yeah.
a
There are
more
some
subtle job of
actors.
it.
Right, exactly, because there are some actors where it's like they can't really help themselves. They're just funny, right?
Yeah,
Like, even doing regular things, it's like, yeah, well, that was kind of funny the way you did it.
yeah,
But like when he like sends them away and then he's like, okay, like everything's great, we got the tapes and everything. He's like, and if you get any other, like leads or
like if
whatever,
you need me again,
like,
like
yeah, like, don't contact me. And then he slams the door. Like,
yeah,
why? Why would he do that? That doesn't make
I
any sense.
know.
Because
It's so
other than
weird.
it's funny because he's so kooky. But what the hell is that doing in Stranger Things?
Yeah,
That
honestly,
that's what I'm
it's
saying. Like, this entire season is seems so it wavers between being an outright comedy and then being a serious film, right? And that's where I'm saying it's like it's Scary Movie versus Scream, right? Because Scream
mm,
is the more sincere version, even though Scream has got some definite like metafictional moments in it. But
yeah,
Scary Movie is just like outright a parody, right?
right,
But this
yeah,
at times very much feels like it's a parody of what the original was doing. So yeah, him as a character, like, I don't know, it just, yeah, the actor and everything else.
yeah.
Um,
Because I think that the story with that character is really good. It's really interesting to see somebody actually looking into everything that's
right.
that happened because it is very unusual.
Yes, and it does. It's his entire presence in the season feels very much like a response to the criticism of fans, where it's like, why does nobody care about the disappearance of Barb?
Right,
And then they're
yeah,
like, all right, we'll address that. Here's how we're going to address that. But even the parents themselves are caricatures of like grieving parents or parents who are desperately concerned about the disappearance of their daughter. Like when they're there eating chicken, they've got their KFC, and it's
yeah,
just like Steve is like, oh, it's finger licking good. And it's like, ah ha ha, right? And it's like
yeah,
that chubby guy, like that. Do you know what I mean? Like that whole thing is being played for laughs, and it's like
yeah.
this is not a sincere um moment that you get where they are desperately clinging to hope. Like, you don't see like the mother breaking down in tears trying to be tough and trying to have hope or anything like that. It's just like, huh, isn't KFC great? Yep. Oh, don't worry, we'll find her, it's okay. What do you guys really, you guys know Barb? Like, you are literally
Yeah.
her parents. You know that she didn't just disappear somewhere, that she definitely wasn't kidnapped because there's no ransom. No, why on earth do you guys still have any hope? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I do like that they're frustrated, or at least the father is frustrated at Hopper for not doing enough that he just gave up. Like, I think that's, you know, a genuinely good moment. But yeah, the fact that they're just like, we can't get any help here. We're gonna, move town and,
Sell
invest
our
everything
house. Yeah.
into this investigator. It's like it's been a year and like that's what you're going with. Like, it's I don't know, and the fact that they've got like so many pictures of Barb up, like I don't know, that's
That's what I'm
overkill.
saying, is it's such lazy writing, and there's just such a better way, a subtle way of doing it that would actually have resonance, that would
Yeah,
have an emotional impact. But they're not going for emotional impact here. Like, you don't see, like, instead of like all like the pictures, even if you had all of the so many pictures, but it's like you also see like whatever, a bunch of like empty liquor bottles or something like that. And like, like I say, one of them breaks down in tears, and um, one of them's really distant, or do you know what I mean? But instead, like, they're present, they're smiling, they're just enjoying KFC. They're just like, oh yeah, blah, 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 we're gonna do this, and everything's gonna be great. Like,
yeah,
but there's no crack in that. It doesn't hold up.
yeah, and I don't really understand, you know, like because Nancy is like, oh, we've rescheduled this dinner with them so many times. It's like, but then they go there and it doesn't seem like there was actually any purpose to it.
Nope.
So I'm like, why did you like have to go sit down with them? Oh, because we needed this scene in the series. All right.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
um, yeah.
So I guess the other new characters that we've got would be Eight and her friends.
Yeah.
If you could go ahead, you go for it.
Um, I love Eight's powers. I think that that's, again, as I said earlier, like a fascinating aspect to explore what other results these experiments have had. Um, I think that what they're doing is fascinating. That they're going after the people who did this to them.
I do like
Except,
that. Yeah.
yeah, except that it's well, are they going after only the people who did this stuff to Eight and not to all of them? Like I don't know why everybody else is with Eight.
I have
Um,
no idea why her friends are going along with this.
yeah,
Totally. Let's track down these people and murder them. Why?
yeah.
Like,
It's like, oh, we were all, like used and abused or whatever, and it's like, okay, but
yeah.
really, like the guy. I honestly, one of my biggest complaints about them is the guy with the gigantic mohawk who puts on a mask every time he goes out. I'm like, you have a gigantic mohawk. You are not subtle.
It doesn't make any sense. It's so frustrating. I'm telling you, it is watching a comedy. It's that you look at this and you're just like, you cannot expect me to believe for a second that these people are real characters. That they are all caricatures of
Yeah, you've got
punks.
you've got the big tough guy who's actually a sweetheart at heart. You've got
Yes.
the crazy, the woman who seems to just literally be, like mentally unstable in some
Yes.
way.
Yeah.
You've got the guy who has a crazy fear of spiders, and I don't know.
That's all
I
we
don't
need to know.
honestly. Like he's just kind of like, yeah, I'm crazy. Okay,
Uh-huh.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's another one too, right? Oh, and the eyes of the operation who doesn't even, you know,
Right.
succeed in keeping an eye out for the cops.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it makes no sense that it's like, you're absolutely right. Like the dude with the mohawk, then it's like, but all of them, they all, because they are such stereotypes or caricatures of punks from the 80s. It's like, well, what kinds of outfits, what kinds of hairstyles and everything else, aesthetics, like fashion statements, did people in the punk scene in the 80s, what did they do? It's like, well, mohawks were big. Check. We'll get one of those guys. Well, leather jackets. Okay, check. We'll get that. Well, having this, like, check. We'll get that. We'll get all of those things. So they will be the most distinguishing characters you can possibly imagine. And then they're doing these covert things with
Yeah.
masks on, but it doesn't make any sense. It's like none of this is thought through unless Eight is somehow disguising their appearance with her mental powers all the time. Right?
Yeah, right.
Wouldn't that be
Oh
the thing?
man, That would be amazing. I would love to see a moment in this season where she, stops using her powers and we get to see that they're all like nerds. That
Yeah,
would be
because if
really
yeah,
fascinating.
yeah, exactly. If it was that, or yeah, that she was like making them look entirely different to everyone else, and she's constantly using her powers to do that. Yeah, that'd be cool. And I agree with you. Like the powers, like I like her powers. I like the whole thing of tracking them down. Everything else is pretty garbage. Um,
Yeah, she's she's too much into this. You have to unlock your full potential by being angry. We all need to go track down the people who did this to us, and kill them all. It's like, oh, do you really need to kill them all? Like, I
I
don't
know, I know.
like everyone who was involved with this.
And involved in what way? Because the what would be the term for it? I forget exactly how it goes, but the um, dispersal of responsibility within a complex economic system, right,
Mm.
means that you can never actually pin down responsibility on one particular party, right? That it's like,
Yeah,
uh,
there are a lot of people who are like complicit in these things, and are you going to track all them down?
yeah,
Like,
exactly. And to what degree, right? Like, and I've brought this up. Like, I've taught philosophy before, and it's been a while since I've done this, but I forget exactly. There is a particular term for it within ethics, but it has to do with who's responsible. Like, how much responsibility can you lay at the hands of one person, particularly in a complex system? So let's say with the bombing of Hiroshima or Nagasaki, then you look at this and you say like, okay, well, who did that? Is it is it the president who made the order, who literally did nothing? He didn't assemble the bomb. He didn't get on a plane. He did not touch it at all, but he gave the order. But he never even actually gave the order to develop the Manhattan Project to begin with. He was
right?
just presented with a completed weapon. So
Yeah,
it's like, well, is it him or is it the person who flew the plane who really, like, it's not his choice whether he does this or not? He's just taking orders. Or is it the people who actually, the physicists who developed the technology, but they didn't actually build the actual bomb
hmm
itself. They're not engineers; they're physicists, right? Is it them, or is it the engineers who assembled it in different ways, like who actually developed it? Is it the? But then even that, is it the person who, like, the whole thing wouldn't hold together unless it has various screws. So is it the person who's working in a screw factory who
yep,
processes that, but he doesn't know where it's going to go? Is that person responsible? Because the bomb wouldn't exist if it wasn't for their hand in the production. Or
yeah.
is it the
Or
people? Go ahead.
the person who like developed the plane,
Right.
you
The
know?
person who developed the plane. Or how is all of this being funded? Well, it's all being funded by tax dollars. So then it's like, oh, is that American citizens? It's like, well, but they get tax dollars from like sales tax. So if you've ever gone and you had sales tax, then it went into government, has potentially ended up. So the thing is, so it's like everybody's responsible, but nobody's responsible, right? So this is the thing, but I don't think that 8 has worked ethics of this, right? Of where
Yeah,
you draw the line, and it is a confusing thing because you're just like, it feels like there should be some kind of uh, like whatever your line is, you should have some line that you just
yes,
establish, and then you just say, but we don't know what that line is. So
yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. And I, man, yeah, I don't know. The other, I would say the biggest frustration about that episode to me, well, maybe not the biggest one, but one of the biggest frustrations in terms of like story is, oh, Brenner is still alive. He trusts me. And I'm like,
uh-huh.
Brenner is alive? Really? I thought that
uh
a Demigorgon jumped on him. Like, yeah, we didn't see his body. Like, really?
thing, right, where it's like you explicitly see the character die on screen, not necessarily dead, so you can't take it for granted. But yeah, we didn't that until then, and 11 has apparently never actually like try to figure out if he's still alive. So it's like, it's so obvious that it's like, oh, Stranger Things 3, this is going to be a thing. or if not
Yeah.
Stranger Things 3, Stranger Things 4 or 5, he's coming back. And it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know. Yeah. It's definitely I'm talking about, like, it's like laughing, cackling, and it's like no one's gone.
Yes.
Like,
Yes. Um, yeah, sorry, the
I'm just
connection is really slow right now, but
oh
but yeah, absolutely. It's exactly like that, Emperor Palpatine thing.
yeah.
Um, no one's really gone, and I'm just kind of like, oh, I thought that we were moving on to different, villains, and you've got this whole Mind Flayer and everything, which seems really, really cool, who I guess is still around because, at like the very last shot sees him hovering over the upside down version of the school.
Yeah.
So I'm like, there's a lot of interesting things that you could do. And if we're going back to Brenner, I I didn't even really see that much. I don't want to say not too much villainy, but in terms of, his exact role in things, like he was the overseer of all this, but he didn't. It wasn't like he wasn't an intimidating presence. Do you know what I mean?
I do. No, I know exactly what you mean. As much as he's like, like he, because the thing is, you look at this and you're like, well, is Brenner really like the epitome of evil, or is he the top in this? Like, does anybody believe that? Like, it just seems like such a better way of doing it is whoever Brenner's boss is, just bring that character in, which is who I thought Sam Owens, like the new doctor, the new director
Hmm.
of the institute. I thought he was going to be like, that like a boss above Brenner who's like, oh, I'll come in now, which is like often what a sequel would do, which is, you thought that guy was bad. I'm even worse because he wasn't tough enough. But like all that you have to do is you introduce a character like that, instead of bringing back Brenner, because there was nothing in particular about him. You're absolutely right that even though he is a villain, he doesn't seem like, you know a lot of this, like, he stumbled upon. He didn't
Yeah.
think that there was the upside down and that, like, how bad these demigorgons would be or any of that stuff. Like, he didn't see any of those things, and he wasn't trying to create a portal or a gateway. Like, he wasn't trying to do any of that. He just stumbled into it. So it's not like, oh, this guy's going to do it again, and, in a much worse way because he ultimately is trying to take over whatever. Like, it's
Yeah.
like, I don't know, who cares about this guy?
Yeah, it honestly would have been way more interesting, as you said, if there was a higher up,
Yeah.
and we could get more conflict between the higher up guy, like the
Yes.
big boss, as it
Yes.
were, and Owens,
Right.
right? Like that would be
Yeah.
really, really interesting because Sam Owens is clearly on the side of Eleven and the Hawkins gang.
That's right.
Um, and then seeing him interact with this, big boss would have been interesting, but I guess it's probably going to end up being Brenner.
Yeah.
But like, why can't we see, other facilities, like other, Department of Energy
Yeah.
facilities, and
Yeah.
there's somebody who's in charge of all of them.
Right.
And we expand this into seeing what discoveries all the other facilities have had. And I'm not saying that, I want this to be, you know, like a series that goes on forever or anything, but I just think that expanding the world that way would be really interesting. And you don't need to see what every single facility does, but
Right.
knowing that there are a bunch of other facilities that are doing different things, I think would open it up for example, for fan fiction, for novels that could be written in
Yes.
the Stranger Things universe, for, like maybe spin-offs, but I don't really want spin-off like
Right.
TV series or anything. Um, but just opening up that world, I think, is the better way to go
Absolutely.
than to say, oh, it's Brenner still. He's still around somehow.
Absolutely. You're totally right. Um, okay. So another issue that I have with 8. would be the casting of 8. So, um,
Yeah.
how much how old do you think 8 is supposed to be as a character
Uh, I'm
compared to 11 because we get those shots from when they're children?
yeah, like 4, 5 years difference,
You think
maybe.
that much?
I think like I honestly, it's hard for me to say. Like I think that there's more than a couple years, but like no more than like 5.
Okay,
No
yeah,
more than 5 years.
definitely no more than 5.
Yeah,
So what? The character's supposed to be what, maybe 18 then?
yeah.
Okay.
And
I
how
was
long has she been like on her own?
How long has she been on her own, for one thing? But another thing, like I did look it up because I was like watching her and I'm going like, how old is she? Like the actual actress who plays 8. Then I'm
Hmm.
like, she seems like her age seems very confusing.
Hmm.
Like she looks like she's in her 20s, and then I'm like, and she acts like, she's in charge of this group, and it sure seems like she knows a lot about the world and how to get by on her own. Um, but then it's like, but when you get the flashback, she only looks a couple years older than 11 because they're in the same room, and
Yeah.
she looks like she's maybe 5, maybe 6. I mean, I'd have to like go back to those scenes because maybe I'm misremembering, but yeah, she only looked a few years older than 11. So I did look it up, and the actress was born in 1993. So she's 25 when they filmed that. Like in 2018, well, maybe 24, let's say, when they were actually filming it. But still,
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay, I wasn't wrong. They definitely cast
Yeah.
somebody who I think is much too old because she should look just a little bit older. To me, she should look just a little bit older than 11 because you did those flashbacks to when they were children. But
Yeah.
instead, she's like a decade plus older than the actress Bobby. What is it? Millie Brown.
Millie Bobby Brown.
Millie
Yeah.
Bobby Brown. Yeah, she's like a decade older than her, and I think you can see it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a 90210 moment of like get people who are 30 years old to be like 16.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is really frustrating because of the fantastic casting of Stranger Things 1, of
Yes.
all these, like these child actors who all do a fantastic job.
Yeah.
Like, and then you're okay, all right, fine, whatever. We'll get an older actress. And also, I don't like her. She has a British accent, and I'm like, where did she pick that up from?
That's what
She's
I
been
want to
like
know.
living in a facility for however long,
It
and
makes
then she
no
goes to
sense.
live in Chicago.
Now I did catch this time because it drove me crazy the first time I watched it, but I did catch it that I think the newspaper article then it said something about her like mother being from London, from
Okay.
England. So, but she was what? Kidnapped when she was what, like 3? What, like, come on, a
Yeah.
3-year-old? If you brought a kid who's 3, they no longer they're not traveling with their parents from Great Britain. They come over to North America. They're being raised by people who have American accents. That kid is not maintaining whatever little British accent they had, like with their small vocabulary at that age. They're not maintaining that at all. So
Yeah.
that's the other issue with casting. It doesn't make sense. There's a random accent from out of nowhere with a person who's 10 years older than she's supposed to be. And you're like, what the hell is this? And then she's hanging out with like these people who are definitely like in their 30s.
Yeah.
Most of
Oh
the
yeah,
most
for
of the
sure.
punks. Yeah. Like the dude with the mohawk might even be in his 40s.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so then like and then yeah, she's going to now take care of 11, but really like and I don't know. It was really, to me it was unclear how much she like on the one hand you could have kind of turned her into a villain, right, where
Hmm.
she just wants to exploit 11 for her powers because she is just on this avenging mission to get everybody from the Department of Energy. But uh, it wavers, right, where it's like, oh, she
Yeah.
does care about her, but then she doesn't really care that much about her, only if she's like doing what she wants her to do. And It
Yeah.
could have been interesting if they pushed a little bit more in one direction or the other.
Yeah. So I'm curious as to like how large of a role do you think eight is going to have in any future seasons? I still
Sure.
don't know what to call them. Um, you know, yeah, I'll just leave the question at that.
Um, yeah, no, that's a good question.
If at all.
No, okay. If it's if I were in charge, I would like if I had any influence on the show, I would say it should be so slight
Mm,
that it should be almost non-existent. I
mm,
don't think that I mean, depending on how they use her, unless like because where things stand at the end of this, it's like because of that reporter who releases all of the information to all of these different news outlets, then it becomes one of these things where the Department of Energy can't quite do all of the experiments that it was doing before. They're going to have to kind of lay low, and Hawkins' lab in particular. So it's like, well, where things are going right now, it's a little unclear. But if by opening the portal, this gate to the upside down, if things genuinely are not done, and they certainly cannot be done because we're getting Stranger Things 3, then I wouldn't mind seeing 8 come back, like come to Hawkins to help 11 to say, yeah, my mission of trying to kill everybody from the Department of Energy was maybe misguided. We've got a much bigger enemy than the human beings
yeah.
who did this, that they made a mistake, but the only way that we're going to be able to defeat this thing. So if she came back and joined 11 in that way, I think she'd be a pretty welcome addition. Then that could be fun having her there, especially if she's trying to stop, people from the government or the Department of Energy from interfering with this group from actually trying to stop the Demigorgon and the big bad monster and all of that. But if it's this whole continuation of her mission to track down all of these people from the Department of Energy, then I just don't care. Like, I just don't want to see her at all.
Yeah. So I uh I have a bit of a theory about where they could go with it.
Sure.
Um, the smoke monster, if you want to call it that, because it's not quite the mind flayer, but the smoke monster that infects Will.
Yeah.
It
Yep.
it leaves Will.
Uh-huh.
What if it were to like go into eight, and
Oh, that'd
eight
be
becomes
interesting.
like, yeah, and because then eight would be working with the mind flayer.
Uh-huh.
And I think that that would be interesting to see, you know, because I did really, I genuinely liked seeing conflict between 11 and 8,
Yeah.
having them, be from the same background essentially.
Yeah.
And I think that if you keep them on opposite sides, that would be really interesting.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
that's that exactly. That was basically what I was trying to say is like I wish they pushed a little bit more in one direction or the other. Either that she's
Yeah.
totally on 11's side or that she becomes a little bit more adversarial towards 11. And
Yeah.
in that way, yeah, if she was on the other side and seeing because like I don't quite know what you do with 11 because who do you have her like you can have her fight all of these monsters where it's like a creature feature and she's just fighting these monsters, but I think it's far more enjoyable when you see her going after people, right? Like when
Yes.
she's going after like these characters, because the monsters themselves you don't really feel anything towards them. It's just,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Because
it's the moral issue, right? And it's
right.
it's the fact that 11 maybe doesn't, like, she clearly has a very solid moral compass,
Yeah.
in that she wouldn't kill those animals back
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the lab, and then even it was a struggle for her to actually at the end of Stranger Things 1 cause all those Department of Energy people to have them bleed out of their eyes and
Right.
everything. But she did that. Um, and so I think that if she were to go up against, eight, her
Uh-huh.
sister, as she
Yeah.
calls her, then that would be really difficult for her. And that would be interesting to see how they could play off of each other.
Exactly, because otherwise it's going to just play out like an action movie, right?
Yeah.
Her going against the monsters, but instead, like, there's not really any real tension there. But
Mhm.
yeah, she was going up against eight. I think that would be cool, and especially, yeah, if eight were either being manipulated by or outright working for the Mind Flayer,
Yeah.
like willingly or unwillingly. I think that'd be cool to see these like two with powers going after each other, and especially if you started introducing any others who have been
Yeah.
involved,
Oh,
right?
for sure.
Then you could
Yeah.
get different sides on it, and like the whole series could go in a really fun, interesting direction.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think any of that's going to happen though.
Yeah, I have not looked into like Stranger Things 3 like basically at all. So I'm
Yeah, me neither. I mean, I know a tiny little bit. I honestly, I watched, I think, part of the first trailer that they released, and that was it. But
Mm,
otherwise, I don't know anything else. I
yeah.
just, yeah,
I think that yeah, based on like the fan reaction to um to episode 7 of Stranger Things 2, then I think you're probably right that, 8 won't really be that major of a character.
yeah. I think they definitely learned their lesson. I think that if she's going to be in it, I feel like to some degree it's going to be similar to Avengers Endgame with Miss Marvel. Or Captain
Mm,
Marvel. Yeah, Captain Marvel.
yeah.
That it's like whatever role they had initially envisioned, that it's probably going to be scaled back a fair bit. Now, I'm not a huge MCU fan. I don't even watch most of the movies, but that is correct, is it not? That they like that are, at least as far as we understand, they scaled her role back, or
Yeah, I'm not sure. I could see that, but she's just so overpowered that like, they they couldn't have her be a part of very much of the film, but
right?
yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So, I mean, I don't know what they're going to do going forward. I really hope that you don't get a whole lot of repetition the way you do in Stranger Things 2, because I think there really is genuinely a lot of repetition between Stranger Things and Stranger Things 2, but it's not good.
Yeah.
Um, it's yeah, I mean the whole thing of Will getting attacked, and then something's wrong with Will, and then you get this communication from the other side with him.
Hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like that whole thing, like Joyce's
Yeah.
house like goes crazy all over again. If Joyce's house goes crazy all over again in 3, unless like they just decide that they're just a comedy show from this point forward
Right.
and they just
Yeah.
really play it up, then I'm like, if they go full on comedy, then it's like, okay, I'm on board for that. But if they try to
Yeah.
make this like serious, like Joyce is going crazy again, and I'm just like,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. It's I really hope that we do get a lot more new. Um and new in terms of story, not in terms of characters, because
right.
they don't necessarily know how to do characters very well
And
or introduce
no,
characters very well.
yeah, all of these like new characters, like it's just junk. Because with all of them, whether you're talking about Billy or Mad Max or Eight, I guess those would be the three specifically. Then they try to establish that they're badasses in
Mm,
very short fashion. But the way that we know that 11 is so cool is that it slowly, slowly, slowly gets revealed, and we don't
yeah.
know. We don't even know that she is cool at first, that she's got powers.
Yeah.
And it's like they are so slight, and they continue to escalate, right? That they just go
Mm,
up and up and up and up and up. But how does Stranger Things 2 start? It just right out of the gate, like a sequel, right? That
yeah.
it's like, because Stranger Things 1, it starts with them playing Dungeons and Dragons, and you don't really know very much of what's going on. You don't really see a monster and all of that. Like, I mean, I guess it does start in the basement of
Yeah.
Hawkins' lab, and then you do have that guy who gets attacked, and then you go into the Dungeons and Dragons scene. But even with that, you don't know exactly what the monsters are, what the
Mm,
scope of their abilities are. You don't really know much at all. But with this, then you get this high-speed chase. It's none of the characters that we recognize. It clearly is establishing that this is going to be much more important than it actually is in the season.
Yep.
And then you see her, being able to get them to see this vision of the bridge falling apart and they crash and all that. And then you see that she's got the tattoo and she's 8, and it's like, whoa, she is so badass, because we just got to see her do everything that she can do.
Yeah.
Like within like minutes, that we know the full extent of her powers. And it's like with 11, the only not the only reason, but I would say to me, I said it in the first discussion that we had, one of my favorite moments from Stranger Things from the first season is when 11 flips the van. Mm-hmm. That is such an amazing moment, because you don't know that she can do that, right? Yeah. And you've seen her do little bits, and you know that she can do this, and she can do this, and she can do this, but you don't know. She doesn't even know that she can do that, right?
Yeah.
And then to see that actually happen, where the van flips right over them, then it's this amazing scene. But with 8, like, they're just like, here's everything she can do immediately.
Yeah. Yeah, I said it before. I literally, like, watching it for the first time, then I thought, oh, okay, this is what, Stranger Things 2 is going to be about. There are more people with powers. And that is not at all what it was about.
I know.
I feel lied to.
Yes, because you're being misled. It starts out that way, and you're sure that this is what it's going to be about. Because, like, if you look at Stranger Things 1, starts out in the basement of Hawkins' lab, and there is this monster that is attacking people, and something is seriously wrong, and you realize, okay, it's some kind of supernatural creature, right? Something is messed up. Well, the whole thing is us trying to get back to that basement. It's trying to figure out what that monster is and get back to that particular place in Hawkins, because you're kind of being frustrated the whole time, where you've got the gates around it, and Hopper wants to get in, and even he is chief of police, he can't get in, and you just want to get there, because that first little scene teased us about this. But with this one, then it's like it starts out with her, and then you think, oh, it's going to be about all these other people with powers, but it's not. And even when you do ultimately get to spend time with her, then you're like, this stinks. I want to know more about Hawkins' lab. Like, because the monsters are coming up now. They're coming up from the pit. Yeah. Do you have anything else in particular that you wanted to talk about with this?
I will say the good. Steve Harrington being the babysitter, I think, is fantastic. I didn't remember how good it was, but rewatching it, I'm just like, oh yeah, this actually is fantastic. Watching him, like, try to keep the kids safe, but like, realizing that there's a big thing going on here, and they know more than I do. And, oh man, and everything about it, and like all the Dustin and him bonding stuff, it's fantastic.
Yeah, his relationship with Dustin is fun, and the whole babysitting thing, like Adventures in Babysitting starring Steve Harrington, is really fun. Like, I really like that. Like, I could definitely do with a whole bunch more of that. I would say, like, that's the one thing that I would say to kind of end this, that I said it earlier, I feel like the characters that you want to spend time with in this season, you don't get very much time with them. And so, very, like, to elaborate on that just a little bit, I think you want more time with Nancy and Jonathan, because they were a great pairing in the first season, right? Like, because they have a lot of moments in the first season, because Jonathan actually believes Nancy, no one else believes her, and they're working independently, right? Because you've got all these different groups that are working independently, and they are still working independently in this, but they're not really doing anything other than just saying what happened in season 1.
Yeah, I know. I was gonna say, like, they have a very small role in the overall plot,
and it doesn't really do anything other than just say, well, the Department of Energy in general is going to have to stop pursuing this whole thing. But the Department of Energy, I think, was already convinced of that, because they didn't know how to shut down the gate, and they wanted to. So it's like, I don't know what the hell that did, other than made it harder to, thwart this thing if it comes back in some way. Because, like, 11
and
shut
gave
down
Barb closure, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, that's the thing. I think it really was, to some degree, responding to what fans were complaining about. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I wanted more with Nancy and Jonathan, and instead, I think you get, almost as much screen time with Billy and Mad Max.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, but so you took characters that we liked, who had a good dynamic, and
Hmm.
there was some, romantic tension between them, and it does kind of like it ultimately plays out in the basement of that guy, like the reporter guy's house, right? And so
Yeah.
like that leaves things in an interesting position, like with her and Steve and all of that. Um, but yeah, I wanted more with them.
Yeah.
And
I love all the stuff with Nancy. I love all the stuff with Steve.
yeah,
I want more, like, I wanted more of Eleven
yeah.
actually doing things rather than being
Yes.
locked up in a house.
Just
Um,
yeah, let's take the coolest character and just put her in a cabin and then go hang out in Chicago with somebody else who's doing stuff and then show up at the very, very end. Like, don't you guys know
yeah,
why we liked season one?
honestly. Yeah. I wanted Mike to do more because I don't feel like he
Yeah.
really did anything.
He did very little.
He was a great support to Will and to other characters, but like he didn't do
He didn't do
anything.
anything. He was effectively a teddy bear for Will, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, like, what did he do? Did Mike do anything?
Um.
Like, I don't know. I guess he
That's
kind of
really.
helped with the map, I guess. And then he
Uh,
kind of convinced Steve and all of them. No, he was because he was at the bedside at that point, right? He didn't go into the tunnels, did he?
um. No, no, he didn't, because he was back at the lab, and he ran to say it's a trap, but it was too late.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. I know. And Mike was such a I mean, I would say probably the character, I don't know, maybe the character with the most screen time in season
Hmm.
one.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then he, I don't know, went down and he became like maybe like the 10th most screen time, the 12th
Hmm.
most. Like he really, like Dustin had more screen time, Lucas had more screen time, Mad Max had more screen time. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like all these like characters who were more peripheral characters. Um, and so it's like all of these key ones just kind of, yeah.
yeah,
Oh, one other complaint that I have, and then I'm really like pretty much finished with this. Um,
yeah.
it's the writing uh, is so lazy in so many different ways. One of the ways, like I don't know how many times it happens, but I would say at least four, but maybe five or six different times. The writers just did the exact same thing where get a couple characters to start arguing, and then one other character walks off and goes, "Guys, guys." And they had multiple characters who did, and it was the exact same line every time. And they're like, blah 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 blah, and it was like different characters. I'm like, stop doing that! Stop doing that
Yeah,
stupid line because they did it so many times, guys,
yeah,
guys, and like they're staring at this like seriously. If you
yeah.
watch it, it
I mean, the
happens
character
every
that I
time.
picture doing that is Dustin, but I
Dustin does it a
know
bunch. Steve
that Hopper
Harrington ends up
definitely
does
did
it.
it
Opera does it.
because he
Yes.
does it with the other police officers,
Uh
right?
huh. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man.
It's
Honestly,
yeah.
I wonder if they're gonna have to have any feedback with or any response to the fact that what happened to the farmers? All their fields got ruined, and
Right.
that's gonna be that first half of Stranger Things
It's
3.
there's going to be an investigator from the Department of Agriculture who shows up, who's trying to figure this out, and it's like, oh man, I've got to get to the bottom of this. What happened to the
Yeah.
pumpkins? The other thing that made no sense, the one farmer was complaining. He's going, it's the day before Halloween, and this happens to my pumpkins. I'm like, what freaking pumpkin farmer is selling pumpkins the day before Halloween? They're still in your field. Literally, you're talking about tomorrow is Halloween. Who's showing up on Halloween? Best get my pumpkin now. It's like if he said it's October 10th and this just happened to my pumpkins, my entire like crop.
Yeah.
is like ruined. Instead, he's like the day before. It's like Homer Simpson who invests in pumpkins and he continues investing into November, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It was, yeah, that was really, because like it would have been bad if the pumpkins like weren't ripe yet, if they were like still green or whatever they are at first, or just like really small, like, yeah,
Anything, but I'm pretty sure he said it's the day before
yeah,
Halloween,
he
and
definitely
it's
did.
they were still in his field, legitimately. Like that's what I'm saying. Like with like the
Well, I
writers,
mean, it
it's
was pick your own.
nobody's going Halloween day. That's not how Halloween works. I'm so frustrated. I'm like, whatever writer wrote that stupid thing with like the basketball scene and like the rules with like taking a charge, that I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
you don't know basketball. And it's like, can somebody get this
Now,
person a calendar? Do they know when Halloween takes place? Like,
yeah. Now, if he had a line about like, man, I've got Thanksgiving coming up, then that would, be
sure,
a little bit better because, pumpkin pie,
sure.
that's a thing.
Yeah.
But no, he was concerned about Halloween.
Right. Right. It's like this person doesn't even know how Halloween works, the traditions of Halloween. It's like every Halloween, families get together and they go to the pumpkin patch and they pick a pumpkin and they say trick or treat for some reason. Like, do you know how Halloween works? Are you new here?
Oh, yeah.
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 Just bad writing in general. And season one had like almost no instances of bad writing. I think, like I say, the only
Yeah.
one that we really pointed out was just that they didn't explore much with what happened with Barb, and people in town didn't seem that concerned about the disappearances.
Yep. Yep. Also, okay, Joyce with the like she was able to see the little discrepancies on the VCR tape and was like, "Look, it's the exact same thing as Will drew." I'm just kind of like, "Is it though?" That seems like a bit of a stretch. Like, yeah, I see like a little. You didn't even know how the VCR worked before.
Right. Totally. Yeah, that whole thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was like it's just one of those things because like it's definitely like a poltergeist thing that you get in season one with
Yeah.
that. And then with this, they're just like, ooh, remember what else Poltergeist did? It was the TV and the static in the TV, right? And it's like, to quote Mad Max, it's a bit derivative, but okay. Like, yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. All right,
Um,
so season three, we're gonna do our episode by episode reaction slash review, and that starts July 4th. And so the plan is that we will basically release one episode a day, right?
yeah, that's the plan.
Yeah, yeah. And so I don't know how many episodes because season one had 8, and then season two has got 9. So I don't know
Yeah.
how many they're releasing. I don't know if we're gonna get one extra episode with every season.
Yeah. I'd be okay with that as long as the episodes are worthwhile.
Yeah, me too. I'm fine with it as well, as long as we
Yeah.
don't get another episode 7 from season 2.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, so in general, folks, you can look forward to the episode by episode review and reaction, and feel free to comment below. And I know that this was almost entirely negative, and rightfully so. We should demand
Yes.
better writing and better execution because the
We
Duffer
really should.
Brothers,
Yeah.
yeah, they know what they're doing because season one was so good. And I
Yeah.
checked, they wrote and directed just as many episodes in season two as they did in season one, like they did the
Wow.
first two and the last two. So I don't understand because and the first episode is like maybe the most appalling aside from like episode 7, but it's like but that's really the placement of episode 7.
Yeah.
um but the first one with that ridiculous sound editing that they have throughout, I don't understand how the Duffer Brothers wrote and directed that. It's just
Yeah.
garbage. It's such
Yeah.
garbage. So anyway, if you folks want to comment on that, or if you disagree, then if you disagree, I cannot imagine that I even need to encourage you to comment below.
It's true.
I'm sure we'll just get comments anyway. You don't have to
Yeah.
ask people to complain. They will just complain willingly.
It's true.
Yeah, but if you want to leave a nicer response, then feel free. Because I know that most people, at least from what I've seen, people love Stranger Things 2. And I don't get what show they were watching.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't get it either. it's just not the same. I think
No,
that people are just like looking at it and they're like, oh yeah, it was more Stranger Things, so that was good. And I was like, but it wasn't more Stranger Things.
right. Right.
Yeah.
I know. And so that's the thing. So I guess I look at that and I think like I don't have an issue with people really enjoying Stranger Things 2. I have an issue if people really enjoyed Stranger Things 1 and then 2. I don't understand how you can like both of those. And
Yeah.
like I just don't get that. Cuz if you like Stranger Things 2, like that's fine. Like there are plenty of things that do that that have what I think is, lazy sound design to establish character and all that stuff. But it's like I don't watch that stuff, but other people do and they like it, and that's fine. But it's such a departure from the first one. So
Absolutely.
I don't know. In terms of sequels, does the third one end up usually being better?
Um, no, I feel like the second one is usually considered the best.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, right? Trying to think of like when the third one's good. Like,
Toy Story 3 is good.
yeah, but Toy Story 2 didn't go bad in Toy Story
I
2.
know.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't I don't know. Yeah, because you are right. Typically the second one is, especially if you're gonna get like a trilogy, and now I think they're gonna get 4 or 5 seasons out of this, I think is what they said. So
Mm.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to expect with Stranger Things 3, but we'll comment on it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right, folks. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.
Bye.
Ignore the bell, people. We're gonna keep going. We're still ignoring it. Don't worry. I, I don't know what that. I think that's the fire drill. All right, we're gonna go home. Yeah. All right, we're done.